Hello everyone, welcome once again. What we have seen in our past sessions, we have almost covered a big part of the defined phase of the DMAC framework of the Six Sigma methodology. We have covered understanding the customer requirement, which actually started from identifying the customers. We understood the customer requirements. We tried to measure customer requirement into something that is quantifiable. We then prioritized the customer requirement on 3 parameters using Kano diagram. We then put together this entire information into a document called as project charter, which had 6 key elements: problem statement, business case, goal, scope, timeline, and the project team. And after the charter was completed, we then prepared a project team and assigned the role and responsibility of each team member in that team using a method called as RACI diagram. We prepared a RACI diagram, and then after that we also prepared a communication plan to ensure how are we going to track the entire progress of the project and how are we going to communicate it to the entire audience, the internal and the external audience if we have any. And then we also conducted the stakeholder analysis to ensure that all the stakeholders are aligned with what we are doing. We understand the mood of different stakeholders that are part of this project, who gets impacted by this project directly or indirectly, what kind of impact they have with the change that we may having, and how do we involve them in this entire project that we are doing. What kind of barriers they can pose, what kind of support do we need from them or we may need from them. So that is a part of the stakeholder analysis. Now we are almost at the end of this project, and where we need to understand the process in question that we have right now, which we are planning to improve, for which we had set the boundaries during our discussion in the project charter, when we're talking about the scope aspects, where we talked about what is the start point of a process and what is the end point of the process. So here we will talk about a methodology to map the process, to understand the process at a high level. So this is the last leg of the defined phase, where we try to understand the process. We like to map the process at a high level. When we had begun this session, we talked about the y equal to fx equation, where we said that every process which we are planning to improve has 3 key components: the input of the process step, and the output of the process. Same concept applies here, but here we are going to map the input with respect to the different process step and those process steps with respect to different outputs here. So if you look into the screen, it tells you what is a process. First, to begin with, a process in any process is any recurring sequence of events, steps, activities or tasks which result in a desired output that the customer has expected you to provide. And a process must have steps that repeat each time the process is used. That's very important. Now it sounds very simple, sounds very common sense, that the process steps are something that gets repeated each time a process is used. Does it happen every time? Not every time, because there are certain exceptions. In certain exceptions, you do not repeat the same process step. Sometimes you use different process step. For example, we take the same road while we go to our office, school, colleges, but sometimes we take a shortcut because the traffic may be less there, or sometimes we are using the Google map as an application helping us, which is the shortest route or which route has the least traffic. So sometimes we change our route, or sometimes we change our steps depending on the requirements, but typically a process should not have any variation. It should have a standard one, and there can be a few variations sometimes which are used rarely. Okay, and in this situation we use SIPOC that helps us to understand process at a very high level. So if you look into this slide, here we're talking about how do we manage a process. We must be able to describe it in a way that can be easily understood, which should have a name, which shows a workflow with a process map and describe its purpose with an operational description. The first activity of the process map or in the measure phase is to adequately describe the process under investigation. So in the measure phase, when we go from the define phase, we detail out each step in that process. In the define phase, we do not detail out, we only talk about at a very high level, 6 to 7 steps and not more than that. So if I have to talk about process mapping, because I've used this word process mapping a couple of times. So if you look into this slide, it says process mapping is a tool that is used to understand, analyze and document processes and activities in an organization and assist in identifying opportunities for improvement. You would have seen this kind of graph in your different sessions in different courses. It's called a flow chart that you can see here. We use certain boxes that helps us to map a process. That's how we start mapping a process. If we look into the next slide, here we talk about the three key components of mapping a process, starting from input, the process step, and the final output, as they are the key things we need to understand. Now, when we are making a SIPOC, the input, process, and output become the key aspects of the process that help us in the measure and the analyze phase of the Six Sigma methodology. Now, if you look into this slide, here we talk about how should we map a process, what kind of methods we should have while we're mapping a process. There can be three views typically. One view can be what we think a process is. Second view can be what a process actually is. Third view is what it actually should be. So there are three views. What is the right view of looking at a process? It is always what a process actually is. The way process is actually done, that is the right way of looking at a process, not the way it should be. So if you go and apply for a loan from a bank, now the process, how it should be, you click on the bank website, open the bank website, fill in a form, customer representative from bank contacts you, they take in your details, they send someone at your home, they collect information, documents from you, you sign on certain documents, then they log in your application, you receive information that your application has been processed, then you receive a message your application has been approved, then you receive a message that your loan has been disbursed, and you receive the message that that this amount has been credited to your bank account. Typically should not take 3 to 4 days, that's how it should be. But that's not how it's actually happening. The customer are facing a lot of issues. So you start writing the way it actually happens. Unless you write the process the way it actually happens, how will you know that you have to improve it, or where do you improve it? So what actually happens in a loan processing example is, nobody contacts you. You have provided your details to the bank website, but nobody contacts you. You don't get contacted within 24 hours. Somebody contacts you, says you need to keep these documents ready, I'll come to your house tomorrow, but you are not available at home, or they are not able to find your home, so that might take around 1 to 2 days. They come to your home, they ask you to submit certain documents which you may not have right now, and they say, no, you can't send us the soft copy, we need your signature on those documents. So that becomes a hurdle once again. They go back, and after 2 days they contact you saying that we need more documents, and you could not provide them then, please provide it now. So again they come to your house, you again send them the documents, and then they go back, then they say, sir, your application is processed, is under review, but the interest rate is very high. Then they need certain more documents. You had a loan which you had closed, so they wanted detail of it. This is how a process actually happening. That's how it actually happens when you deal with a bank for getting a loan. And after that, your loan gets disbursed, and then you receive the loan and everything. Then the process is smooth. So this entire experience might take around 7 to 8 days, sometime 10 days also in the most extreme situation. So here, this is how it actually happens. When you map it the way it happens, then only you know where are the bottlenecks, where are the issues. So you identify those areas where you see a bottleneck and you try to improve. You prepare a strategy for those areas. So that's why you should always map the process the way it actually happens, rather than what it should be. What it should be is called the future state of the process. We want to reach there, but where you are right now is the current state. That is the way it is actually happening. In this slide, you can see we're talking about some process mapping symbols. Very typical symbols from the flowchart point of view. A rectangle talks about activity, diamond talks about the decision making box, a very important box here. An arrow talks about the flow. A parallelogram talks about that there are data points. Ellipse talk about the start and end of a process. We typically use it. A circle with a letter of number inside symbolizes the continuation of a flowchart to another page. If a process are too long, it might move from one page to another page. So we use the circle box that number one of the process is going into another page, and so on. So these are some of the symbols that we use here. So this is the basic understanding of the process mapping. In the next session of the SIPOC, the part 2, will cover what exactly is the SIPOC, the different dependent metrics, input matrix, output matrix, and process matrix, different levels of process mapping and all we are going to discuss. So that's in the part 2 of process mapping. Thank you once again. This is Shivendra Sharma.